with demand expected to come back, the question remains, does this mean the economy is back on track?
Companies now, after experimenting with offshore in places like India, Philippines, and Poland, want to bring those jobs back.
We invest in the U.S. We're the biggest exporter in the country. In the cycle we're in right now, we're creating jobs.
From Radio America, it's Neil Asbury's Made in America, the show that explores American industry, large and small, and promotes American-made products everywhere. Put Neil Asbury's Made in America to work for you.
A very big welcome to you today. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Rich, I want to start out the show by talking about competition and how important competition is here in the United States, but certainly for American entrepreneurs and business owners, and how important it is for all Americans to get the best product and the best service. As an American manufacturer, and I got to tell you, I think about it all the time. What are my competitors doing? What can I do better? I got to stay ahead of this. Am I going to become irrelevant? And by doing that, I'm constantly being pushed to make a better product and to figure out something, because I got to stay ahead of the competition. My 500 employees depend on us staying ahead of the competition. And everything that we do, everything that we buy, our quality of life, our prosperity is because of competition. Competition is good. We should not turn over our economy to government bureaucrats, because they pick winners and losers. They want to pick the winners and losers, and that is always bad. It's always bad for competition. It's always bad for the quality of life and the quality of products that we have. Rich, you have that also in your business, in the publishing world. Competition makes you work harder, doesn't it?
Competition proves that there's a market. See, someone would say to me, well, you're in this market and look at the other people that are in it. When I did Latin Trade magazine, for example, you had all sorts of different products going and discussing it, like Lagniappe newsletter in the day was a really important product to read. So my response was, well, that shows that there's a very strong market there. So it doesn't scare me. It kind of reinforces the fact that I'm in the right place, and I like that. The trick is, as you just pointed out, that you have to be better than the average bear. You have to really rise to the top of something that's different than the other people are doing, that really provides something that people need to make a decision and enjoy reading it and become attached to it. And that's what we've done, for, 12 magazines later.
Yeah, and, look, competition is what provides us our quality of life, the great quality of life, and the prosperity that we have in our company. Entrepreneurs are not afraid of competition. Entrepreneurs love competition. They just don't like it when the market is stacked against them, like a government bureaucrat picking who should win and who should lose.
That's correct, which is a very scary thought. Reagan made it real clear. So did Joseph Stalin, for that matter, if you look at history. But that's another conversation. We'll get to that later.
Well, let's bring on our first guest. We're very pleased to bring on right now Daren Bakst. He is with the Heritage Foundation, and he's just published a piece. It's in the Daily Signal. It's entitled "Biden's Competition Executive Order Realizes a Central Planner's Dream." Daren, welcome to Made in America.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
That's a pretty tough statement, that Biden's competition executive order. So I guess it's everything to do except for competition. You're calling it a central planner's dream. Please explain.
Yeah, actually, in the title of the article, competition is in quotes. So I kind of want to make it clear. I don't think it has a lot to do with competition. Because as you guys kind of made it very clear, it's the entrepreneurs, it's the American individuals and businesses that are the ones that produce the wealth, create the jobs, help really the economy. And unfortunately, this executive order tries to direct a bunch of agencies across the government to basically pick. You're talking about picking winners and losers. It would do that. It assumes that once firms get to be too big, it's time for the government to step in and to intervene. It punishes success. And what it does is it really does central plan the economy by assuming, okay, we know how, like, the magazine industry should be structured, or other industries should be structured, how big they should be, how many firms there should be. Look, size of a firm by itself doesn't tell you that there's not competition. There can be big firms can be in extremely competitive markets. They can invest. They can be lowering prices, producing more goods and services, better goods and services. That's often what happens. And what my concern is that this executive order tries to use the government and try to dictate how industries should look, how competition, what they think competition should look like. And a lot of it is not even just about competition. It's really a lot of the items listed in the executive order are just simply things that people on the far left simply don't like companies doing in terms of, like, providing customer service. Like, they don't like a certain fee that's provided, or they don't like some other service. And it's just basically like, all right, so let's let the government intervene and dictate how these firms should operate. And that should scare everybody.
And Rich, to bring you in on this, I mean, Daren points out in his article, this is the road to cronyism. And we've talked a lot about cronyism on this show.
Well, of course, because that was one of Obama's favorite words. I mean, you look up the word cronyism, there's Obama, and then there's Solyndra. I mean, Solyndra has to be the poster child for cronyism. It's a good example. But yes, and that is corrupt as can be. It doesn't serve anyone's purpose whatsoever, except those who are running, the organization that's getting the grant and the money from the federal government, and everyone's happy with that, and God knows who's making the money.
But Daren, let me ask you a question on, you say, too big and, they're being penalized for being successful. What do you think about the big tech companies? And I'm talking specifically about Google and Twitter and these companies who have become almost like government utilities, and they are censoring, political thought that is mainstream in the United States. I mean, when 70 odd million people vote for President Trump or ex-President Trump, you would have to say that that's pretty mainstream, the thoughts and the policies that he was promoting. But yet the big tech companies, because they become so big and powerful, feel they have the right to shut down whatever he's saying, and I just think that's wrong. I think that's very, very wrong. So is there a point that they cross the line?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, you asked that. So one thing I would say is big by itself is not bad in and of itself. And you're right. There is every reason to be concerned about what these big tech companies are doing. But what we would want to do is we want to identify the specific problem, and in this case, I think it's chilling speech. And then we'd want to identify the proper solution to addressing that problem. And what Heritage has argued is that the proper solution is to reform a provision called Section 230 that provides some liability protection for some of these platforms. And basically, if you kind of remove some and reform some of these protections, I think you would see them acting in a different way. So we don't want to kind of go down a dangerous path of trying to punish certain companies unless they're engaging in anti-competitive behavior, which nobody's necessarily claiming here. But what in a big tech scenario, there is a legitimate concern regarding the chilling of speech. So in that
which
case,
is a constitutional right, by the way.
Right. But this executive order doesn't get to those issues. It doesn't address these censorship issues. So that, unfortunately, that it doesn't even get to that. It would be interesting to see the left get to this chilling of speech, but they don't, and that's a concern.
Well, here's a concern. I'd like to get your thought on this. When we're discussing this in the last few minutes, I'm thinking of Parler, going back to prior to the election. And Parler was literally shut down in a very collusive way between the Apple Store, the App Store, and Facebook and Instagram and Google. All these people conspired in such a way to basically ghost Parler. Parler lost its platform. Amazon was part of that. So you had all these oligarchs on the left controlling, if you think about it, free speech. There was a group, Parler, it's back now in a different environment, But there was a group that was actually giving those 70 million people a chance to have a say in mainstream, their mainstream. They got shut down. And you say?
I would say that if there's that's why they can bring lawsuits, and then we can enforce the antitrust law. And if there's evidence that there's collusion to that effect, then we should be going after those companies. Antitrust laws should be used to go after anti-competitive behavior. And if that can be established, then we should use it accordingly.
So, Daren, in just in a very short time that we have left, what do you think is the right policy in order to maintain American competitiveness?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the key point and what's missing in the executive order is the kind of hypocrisy of the executive order is not addressing the kind of the elephant in the room, which is as the left wants to continue to create obstacles for entrepreneurs and businesses. If we are really concerned with competition, what we'd be addressing is how the government itself is creating the barriers that make it difficult for businesses to succeed through regulation and taxes. We would be reducing those regulations that reduce innovation, drive up prices, make it less likely.
Daren, I mean, you're exactly right, and I'll tell you. We talk so much about bringing our factories back and all these manufacturing jobs, and they left our shores. But then our government bureaucrats, in their wisdom, does everything possible to create the environment that they have to leave in order to survive, and they don't create the environment to where they can return. You know, American entrepreneurs, they're very loyal to our country. They're very patriotic people. But they have to survive. They have to survive. And you can't survive if you have a government that's out there creating policies that's making it difficult for you at every step of the way. I mean, taxes, regulation, healthcare, so many different things that is roadblocks for us that we have to leave, that they left. They want to come home. Let's create the environment to where they will come home. Daren, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I are going to have some thoughts about what's going on in Cuba. Very, very, very important.
Made in America.
Well, Rich, that was from the movie Scarface, and it's Cuban immigrants in Miami shouting "Libertad, Libertad, Libertad, Liberty, Liberty, Liberty," and today they're shouting "Libertad" all throughout the island of Cuba. Liberty, so important, and these people, that's all they want. They want liberty. We talk about competition. We just talked about competition. You know, look at Cuba. You've been to Cuba how many times? I mean, so many times. Tell us about that. But there is no competition. And the little bit of competition that they had, you know, with some small businesses starting to emerge, some prosperity starting to come to its people, you know, they just extinguished it. They just extinguished it. You take a look at the city. I mean, it's falling apart. It's falling apart. And you know, all of the negativity that you have in our country and all of the watching cable news, I cannot even watch cable news. They're just beating up our country. They're beating up the United States. You know, why? I mean, outside the country, they want to be here. They want to come here. Why? Because this is the land of liberty. You know, and if you listen to our commentators, even if you listen to our politicians, America is the most terrible country in the world. What nonsense is that? Complete bull. And if you want to have any proof of that, look at what's going on in Cuba right now.
Yeah, this is an amazing thing to see. And yes, I've been to Cuba a lot. My company was doing work, and we had a magazine called Cuba Trade. And it was out about 2.5 years ago when we thought Cuba was going to be opening. And we worked with the U.S. Agricultural consortium, which is about 18 different states that are basically agricultural in the sense that rice, pork, beans, corn, wheat, all the basic products that you need to create food were huge shippers and exporters into Cuba in the day. This is prior to Castro. So they all wanted that to come back because only 90 miles away was a major, major, major market for U.S. products. So about 18 different governors, and we worked with them. So I was in Cuba a lot. I was there maybe 8 times. My partner was there about 19 times, 18, 19 times. We were there so often that eventually we had a home in Cuba, and we would have writers go there and stay there rather than stay in the hotels, which, by the way, is run by their underground, CIA anyway. Half the people at some of the hotels that work there, the bellhops, they're all working for the Secret Service in Cuba. And your room's wired, and everyone knows that, so we stopped doing that. But this Cuban thing, seeing it right now, and I spent a lot of time, and I just love the Cuban people. Most amazing people, most amazing migrants to this country. Great contributions. They've made us so successful. But they could take nothing and make it into something. And you see this in Cuba. But I have to tell you, to see, protests in Cuba, there are three different police arms in Cuba. One's the secret guys that you see them on TV now. They look like the regular street protesters, but they're dragging people off. They're bad guys. Then you have the regular, police, and then you have the local police, which are basically your neighbors. And it's a very, very scary group of people. To have these people on the streets shouting, "Libertad, libertad," and at the same time, as you pointed out, and this is great, wrapping themselves in the American flag. Well, I got to tell you something, you're going to get a bullet in your head if you keep doing that. And I'm sure a lot of the people that were arrested are disappearing. They call it they've disappeared 100 people. Disappeared 100 people means they're taking a dirt nap. They're not around anymore.
Well, it's,
very scary.
So,
and wonderful.
The land of hope. The land of hope. Look at this statistic. There are 2.3 million Cuban Americans. There are 11 million Cubans on the island of Cuba. The 2.3 million Cuban Americans, their GDP is greater than the 11 million that's living on the island, right? Mm-hmm. And you'd say, well, the Cuban Americans, they're hardworking people. They are. And they're an immigrant group that's done better than any of the other immigrant groups. The Cuban Americans are ranked number 73 as in the U.S. as far as the economic success. So they're definitely not at the top of the list, right? But that just goes to show you, we are the land of opportunity. We are the land of opportunity. You got 2.3 million Cuban Americans that is producing more, that has a higher GDP than the whole nation, the whole country of Cuba. Why is that? Because they were given opportunity. They came here, and they're not all, tremendously, hugely successful, but still, they're all doing something. They're all creating, they're working, they're having productive lives. And that's why you're hearing this Libertad right now. You're hearing that Libertad. And let me tell you, I've been in the Florida Keys. I go out fishing. I'm in the Florida Straits. I'm out there. I love it. That's my go-to place, my happy place. I've seen the rafts. Coming over. And let me tell you, the way that they come over here, it'll rip your heart out. What they're risking to come over here, the land of hope.
Exactly. They will come over through the Florida Straits, which has some of the most aggregate number of sharks that you've seen in the world are in the Florida Straits. You don't hear those stories very often.
And rough waters.
And bad weather, and they're getting attacked.
Right, because it's the land of opportunity.
But listen, it's important for Alejandro de Mayorkas, for him to say, you can't come to this country. I have never heard that from anybody. People who want liberty, willing to take the shot and get eaten by a shark, and you're telling that person, ain't worth it, you're not coming here. I'm embarrassed.
The time is never right to attempt migration by sea. To those who risk their lives doing so, this risk is not worth taking. Allow me to be clear. If you take to the sea, you will not come to the United States.
Well, Rich, the reason that's happening is because there is no freedom, there is no hope, there is no opportunity. And absent to that, you put it all on the line. It's kind of like they're saying life is not worth living under the conditions. And that's socialism. That's socialism. We talk about socialism. we have a group of people. They're not a big number, but they're a very vocal number of people in our country talking about socialism, socialism, socialism. Where are they right now in condemning what's going on in Cuba? That's the type of country that they want for all of us.
But you notice that
That's the kind of
AOC,
country.
Bernie Sanders, and the others, they're all pretty quiet right now because what they're saying is irrelevant to what we're seeing right now. It's just unbelievable. Unbelievable that could happen.
Well, Rich, we definitely got the motors running there. I mean, I got to tell you, you've been there. You love the island of Cuba, and if you're in South Florida, you love the Cuban people. But this is really, really incredible what's going on. Hey, Rich, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about there are nearly 2 million Americans right now refusing to go back to work because they got all this free money. Boy, what's that doing to our economy? What's that doing to our entrepreneurs who's trying to be successful and help to create prosperity for our country? We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Made in America.
Sharply higher at the open, stocks continued to perform well over the course of the day Tuesday.
And I think that bodes well here over the next couple of years for having bigger demands coming to this country.
Now, more of Neil Asbury's Made in America.
Very big welcome to you today. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Rich, there's nearly 2 million Americans right now sitting at home, refusing to go back to work, very capable of working. And they're just very happy to collect all of this free money. You know what happens after a while is that you just that's who you are. You just sit at home and you do nothing. I mean, you're not helping people by that. I mean, you're taking very productive times in their lives and you're just like putting a big X through it. And where people could be growing their careers, they could be learning things and doing things. They're sitting at home. And I got to tell you, as an entrepreneur, we got so many positions that we can't fill. I mean, in manufacturing jobs, good jobs, pays good money, good benefits, but you can't find people to work.
And it's not just in one area for you. You're all over the country.
And it's all over the country.
So it's pervasive right now.
And it's every industry. Everybody I talk to, it's like you can't find people. You can't find people. So if we got all of this unemployment in our country, you have all this unemployment, and we're spending all this money on unemployment benefits, and yet you have jobs that are going unfilled, and people just don't even care. They're not even trying. I think that's sad.
Well, that is sad. And let me tell you how this came about, and I was thinking about it, that when certain things happen in the country, unintended consequences occur as a result of that. People don't think about that. So, Neil, you just pointed out 1.8 million people are sitting on the sidelines taking money for doing nothing from the federal government. And at the same time, we're having problems getting our manufactured products out, which is affecting, obviously, the supply chain. You have a problem. You manufacture material all over the country and all over the world. And the supply chain, I would think, for you in some of these areas is pretty constrained every now and then.
Oh, every day.
Every day you have a problem. There are challenges.
Every day. I mean, if you talk to any manufacturer right now, they are really struggling. They're struggling because the supply chain is completely dysfunctional, but they can't get people to work. They can't get people to work. And that's a good lead in here to our guest, who's one of those people, Rich, who you know very well. He's in your industry. You're in, someone that you know and that you very much appreciate. Lou Yovino from the Printer's Printer. Lou, welcome to Made in America.
Hey, good afternoon, fellas. How are you doing?
We're doing great. Lou, let me ask you how this affects you. We're talking about the supply chain, and I know we've had this conversation, and I have to point out up front to everybody, Lou is my printer. I've known him for years. He does phenomenal work, but he has 35 years in the industry, so he knows good times, he knows bad times. Lou, we're seeing right now that the paper, now obviously when you print you need paper. The paper industry, the manufacturer of paper, has got a problem. Got all sorts of problems. It's not making enough paper, and they're coming out right now saying that, you know what, we're going to give you reduced supplies of paper. You need 100%, we're going to give you 60%. Lou, how does that affect guys like you and ultimately guys like me who own magazines? And then going into fourth quarter, it sounds like we're going to have a problem with catalogs, direct mail. This is all part of the American industry. Lou, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I will tell you that I think the problem is going to be growing. I've been in touch with all my paper suppliers, paper vendors, and all of them across the board are saying that it's going to get worse, where we have only a certain amount of paper being imported, and it's costing more now to import the paper, as well as other like raw material supplies that we need for printing, for inks, the virgin aluminum for the metal plates. So, you have those challenges with the supplies and supply line. And then, of course, you also have the situation where you have employees that you almost have to start paying more money for to keep them because there's not a workforce to be able to hire new employees. So it's really a double-edged sword for us, and it certainly makes things challenging, a little scary, to be honest with you.
And so, Lou, what are you doing? I mean, as far as pricing your product, I mean, if you got the supply chain, everything costs more. I mean, the freight, you see what's happening with inflation. It was up another 5%. I think this inflation is here for the long haul. I think I think we're just seeing the beginning of it. I mean, we've got a lot of inflation. I think, the whole, you talk about you can't get the paper. And my own story is my second book just got published, and it's called Mapping America. And I wanted it to be printed in America. And it took me 5 months to get the book printed just because the printers couldn't get it done. And it took that long to make however many thousands of books that we did. So I understand that this is a real problem. So how are you, how are you going to survive this? And, what are you going to do with your pricing? I mean, are you starting to I guess you have to pass that on, right?
Yeah, well, we certainly are passing along these paper increases and certain other increases with supplies that are taking place. And sometimes, of course, you might have to eat the cost, and you can't pass the cost along to the client, depending on, you might have certain contracts or certain expectations for price points. So it does make it difficult. And, we're working extra hard, trying to basically, let's say, scramble just to find the particular paper requirements, weights, whether it's satin finish paper, gloss paper. Some paper companies are out of certain stocks, but not other stocks. So it's challenging, and we're hustling here just to really bring it all together and constantly connect the dots because we're a production-based facility, and we have to keep production up, which means we have to keep the presses running. We have to keep our customers happy, and we need supplies.
And let me take it to my side for a second, Lou, and that is that if in fact Lou has trouble with paper, anyone for that matter in the printing business, and we need a lot of paper, what happens if you have to have a 160-page magazine going into fourth quarter? That's very important, but you can't print 160 pages because they may not have enough paper, or you may not have enough ink. What I'm saying is that it's going to, at some point, there's going to be an effect that you don't like. That's going to have, you're going to have to make hard decisions, maybe, if we get to that point. And that's what worries me, Lou. That's the unintended consequence of bad management, I think.
Yeah.
Not private company. I'm talking federal management.
Yeah, and it's a scary time because, typically in the printing industry, the summer tends to slow down a little bit with sales. People go on vacation and whatnot, and you look towards August. Hopefully now kids will go back to school, so you have the back to school, and then you roll into the fourth quarter, and everyone looks for a strong fourth quarter. And so if there is serious problems with supplies and the materials, are you going to have that strong fourth quarter? Can you have that strong fourth quarter? So these are all scary propositions on the horizon, to be honest with you.
And can you even get the people that you need to produce the product?
Produce it, right. Come to work. No, can't go to work. I'm sitting home.
Yeah.
Hey, Lou, thanks for being on the show. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Lou Yovino from Printer's Printer. Thank you. Coming up, we have David Williams, the president of the Taxpayers Alliance.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Well, Rich, as a couple of entrepreneurs, we talked about remaining competitive. And that was something we talked about just a moment ago. And being competitive, the taxes we pay, if our government gets just so greedy to where taxes are being increased and the money that we will invest in our companies is being taken away from us so we could pay taxes and more taxes, where our competitive countries that we go up against, I'm an American manufacturer. I mean, I got the Koreans and the Taiwanese and the Chinese and the Germans and the French, and, they have a much more competitive environment than we do. And it's hard to believe that, when you have socialist Europe being a much better place to have a business because of taxes and regulation than the United States. I mean, something is very, very wrong. But that's where we're headed. We got this $3.5 trillion proposed infrastructure bill, which is going to be rammed through, Democrat only. And, how are they going to pay for it? They say, oh, well, we're not going to raise taxes on those earning less than $400,000. Raising taxes, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you raise taxes on corporations, they're going to have to pass that on. It's the consumer that's ultimately going to pay for it. If you don't believe that, then you really, I mean, something's very, very, very off. There's no free money. There is no free money. And when you take money away from the most productive part of the society and give it to the most unproductive part of society, you're going to sacrifice. There's going to be a lot of sacrifices, and that's what we're seeing unfold in front of us. We're very pleased to bring on right now David Williams, who's the president of the Taxpayers Alliance. David, welcome to Made in America.
Thank you so much for having me. And things are getting absolutely out of hand in Congress with the spending, with the taxation, the proposed taxation, let's say. And I'm really concerned about the country, our competitiveness as a country, but also the repercussions it's going to have for folks, consumers, because companies don't pay taxes, consumers do. When there's a tax increase and when you raise the corporate rate, they pass that along to consumers. And obviously that hits middle income and lower income folks the greatest. And that's where we lose our competitiveness as a nation, is when we can't buy as much as we want because the prices increase. And Congress doesn't get this. At least the Democrats don't understand that policy has repercussions. Look at the inflation that we're experiencing. This is because of government policies and what's happened in the last 6 months, and they don't understand that, and they're doubling down on the massive spending and the proposed tax increases, which really scares me as a citizen of this country and what it could mean financially and fiscally.
Well, what I find interesting is this, and that is that Biden likes to frame himself within the context of FDR. He likes that. He talks about FDR, likes that a lot. And FDR was a tax and spend guy. He was the guy who spent a lot of money, came out with a lot of social programs. Everyone thought that was great. And it's really interesting because when you listen to Henry Morgenthau, this is post-FDR's period, he was, of course, the Secretary of Treasury. And this is a great quote, and I've got to give it to you. I want to get your response. And this is from Henry Morgenthau. He said, "We have tried spending money. We are spending more money than we have ever spent before, and it does not work. I want to see this country prosperous. I want to see people get a job. I want to see people get enough to eat. We have never made good enough promises. I say after 8 years of this administration, we have just as much unemployment as when we started, an enormous amount of debt to boost." That's coming from Henry Morgenthau Jr., who is FDR's right-hand guy at the Secretary of Treasury. And here we are with Biden, who likes to put himself into the guise of FDR. I say we're in trouble.
Yeah, that is an absolutely amazing quote and very apt for what's happening today. And I think we need to remember that. And government doesn't create wealth. The private sector creates wealth. People create wealth, not the government. And, if government created wealth, West Virginia would be the richest state in the country because of the amount of earmarks that have gone to West Virginia and the amount of spending. But we know that that's not the case. And that's the frustrating part, is that we want this country to prosper. And for that to happen, you have to have lower taxation. And, we had tax reform in 2017, and we saw the corporate rate reduced. We saw an influx of companies coming into this country. And during the Obama years, when we had a 40% corporate tax rate, companies left. And, you probably remember this, is we had Burger King pretty much go to Canada and do an inversion with Tim Hortons. And what that means is basically they shifted all of their paperwork to Canada because they had a lower corporate tax rate. Well, in 2017, when we flipped that and we reduced our corporate tax rate, we had companies coming back to this country. We saw bonuses going out to folks, and we saw an expansion of the economy that was, unseen in, decades, right? And that's the result of tax reform. And we're going the wrong way now. We're going the other way. We're looking at higher taxes, higher spending, and this is not going to be good. I mean, this is not going to be good for the country or for the economy.
Well, I guess it's not done yet. This 3.5 trillion. I guess God is in the detail, but this first of all, it gets rid of fossil fuels, right? I mean, it's like by 2030 we're getting rid of fossil fuels essentially.
But without a plan. Without a plan of what we're going to do about that.
So
that is wonderful.
You talk about West Virginia. It'll be very interesting to see if Joe Manchin goes along with decimating his state and its economy with agreeing to this. I just don't see that happening. But let's hope Joe remains strong, because right now we got to shoot this thing down. Hey, David, thanks for being on the show. We really appreciate having you with us.
And it's such an important issue. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I are going to have some final thoughts for the day.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, a comment that David had just said, government does not create wealth.
Nope.
The government does not create
Spends
wealth.
money. It spends money.
It's the entrepreneurial community that creates wealth. It's our inventors. It's our risk takers. It's our small businesses create wealth. And when you think that everything that's being stacked against them, and yeah, we talked about taxes here just a moment ago, and the spending of this money, and what's that going to do, Rich? It's going to create inflation like we have not seen. You have so much dollars floating around in the economy, so much dollars that are not earned dollars, by the way. They're not earned dollars. They're created dollars. They're created out of thin air by a couple of strokes on a keyboard. It's not like we've created that wealth. We have diluted our wealth. We've diluted our wealth by creating a currency out of thin air based on nothing, just giving it away, incentivizing people to stay at home and do nothing. And ultimately, there's going to be hell to pay. And part of that we're seeing, Rich, right now. And we're seeing inflation. We're seeing inflation like we've not seen in a long time. Now, you and I remember the 70s, specifically the 76 to 80.
The
Jimmy
Carter years.
The Carter years. Yeah.
It's a euphemism, isn't it? The Carter years. That sounds so much better than the miserable 70s with interest at 21%. Doesn't sound good.
And part of the reason was interest was so high is because inflation was so high.
That's right.
So interest rates had to keep up with inflation. So if inflation was rising out of control, so did interest rates. And but let's talk about inflation right now, because as a business owner, you have to know what your costs are. If you don't know what your costs are, you're in the dark. And 9 times out of 10, you're gonna hit the reef, man. You're gonna sink. You're going down, and it's not going to be pretty. You got to know what your costs are. So right now, if I was thinking into the future, what's going to happen to my costs? We talked with Lou Yovino just a moment ago He doesn't know what his costs are. He said his supply chain is completely disrupted. He doesn't know what his costs are. And so how does he price his product?
Well, and other things affected as well. It's not just the manufacturing side of it, it's the shipping side of it. What he didn't have a chance to tell you is that Lou is paying 4 times the amount of money to import for delivery. Import
for container
TEUs
costs.
Of containers.
Yeah, that's right. Because
4 times. You must have that problem with some of your material.
I have it all the time. My raw materials, the things that I import. What typically would cost $4,000 for one of these shipping containers is 40-foot shipping container. You see them on the roads all the time.
Yeah.
That typically, to get it from somewhere in Asia to the East Coast of the United States, is about $4,000. Right now, it's $16,000.
That's right. It's exactly what Lou was saying.
And you can't get the containers. I mean, that's why Lou has just said that, he can't get the paper product. I bought something for my home the other day, and it didn't have the glass top on it. And the guy said, "Okay, I'm going to order you the glass top. It's a custom sort of size for that table." And it's been weeks now. I haven't got that top. And the guy confessed to me just recently. He didn't want to tell me before. He says, "I can't get glass. I can't get glass. I mean, the whole glass market is shut down. I can't get glass to make a top, for this table." And okay, I'm just a little guy trying to get a table. But think about running a business and trying to take care of your customers, and you have that going on. And you talk about inflation, that's inflation. This has got inflation all over it.
Well, imagine what the pricing will be of products that are dear and you can't find. You can't find them. So the competition to get them is, obviously it's supply and demand driving the price up. So I am very, very concerned. I get concerned when the Fed, the Federal Reserve, has, a dichotomy of opinion. You listen to some people like Jay Powell went one way. Larry Summers went another way for a while. Then they came out the other day and said, well, we kind of think it's going to be short term and we're not going to really start doing anything for a while. That worries me. It scares Steve Moore. When you listen to Steve Moore and what he's talking about, he warned us almost over 6 months ago that we were heading towards an inflationary period, and that's going to be bad. What worries me is that under Carter, and it seems like Biden is close, we had inflation and stagflation, which means the economy went flat for a while, and he didn't know how to deal with it. And I'm very, very worried, unless our president gets his Ovaltine, I'm worried that he won't be able to deal with this either.
Well, Rich, you got the last word, as usual. But unfortunately, we're out of time. We're going to be back again next week for another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.